Holy. This is the part of the presentation where I walk up like I'm some sort of adventurer and I've been off the grid for 8 months. The truth is I left town this morning and I've been fishing for about 2.5 hours. One of the things I love about fly fishing is that it gives you an opportunity to get a little bit more intimate with the ecosystem that you find yourself in. For example, what river am I on? What's the water temp? What's the flow? Has there been a hatch, and do I have flies that mimic what the hatch is? You better, by the way. So far today I've caught a few fish, nothing huge. I did lose the single largest fish that I've ever had on in this river. And it was the size of fish that makes you wonder, how on earth could something that size live in a river this small? But they're here, and the fish are incredibly active today. There have been multiple hatches of multiple insects. I can't identify them specifically. I've seen them 10,000 times. I just don't know what the correct names are. And what's beautiful about it is when you're fishing small river, clear water, you're able, when you're throwing a dry fly that doesn't sink, you'll see the fish come up from the depths. And brown trout have a yellowish color to them, and rainbows have more of a white silver look to them. And it's exciting. Even if you don't catch fish, if I came out here today and I caught nothing, I would still be stoked to be in this environment. That is why I fish. If you haven't done it before, hire a guide. There's nothing wrong with hiring a guide. It's actually a great way to go because the guides are going to put you on the fish. They're going to teach you how to tie flies. They're going to net things for you. Everything is going to be efficient. So, what are you waiting for? One of the issues about fly fishing that I've noticed, especially when people are just starting out, is the gear rabbit hole for fly fishing is as bad as photography. It might be worse than photography. The amount of stuff that you can buy, the amount of stuff that's available for sale, the amount of stuff that looks cool that you think you might need to go fly fishing, the vast majority of it, yeah, it's cool and it can be practical and it can be helpful depending on what it is, but for the most part, you really don't need much. I think one of the cool things that's happening in fly fishing right now is you have a lot of people who are kind of looking for a minimalist approach when it comes to fly fishing. So with that in mind, today I brought out this rod and reel only. Now, as far as I can tell, this was my grandfather's reel, rod and reel, that were passed down to my father, and when my father died, they ended up in my van. So the markings on this rod are so worn off, I have absolutely no idea what it is. The reel is a Browning, which I've never used before. I'm kind of an Orvis guy myself, but this is a Browning reel. And as I'm casting this today, it's basically coming apart in pieces. The cork on the handle is split in 3 places and is starting to fall apart. So when I cast, I can actually feel the rod flexing underneath the cork. And it's not a smooth casting rod and reel combo compared to what I normally throw. But I brought this on purpose because I know that there's a bunch of people out there who are on the fence. Like, I've seen fly fishing and I think I would like it. It looks kind of cool. Now I have to go buy every conceivable piece of kit you can imagine. I mean, just think about all the unboxing videos for cameras and all the people talking about how they set their menus. By the way, if I ever do a thing about how I set my menus, please just take me back out here and throw me in the river. You don't need much. dedicating this fishing trip to my mother, who's not doing particularly well health-wise. She was the one that taught me how to fly fish when I was in 2nd grade. We lived at 8,000 feet in Wyoming, and every night after dinner, right before sunset, we would walk down the mountain and we would fish in a beaver pond, 12, 14-inch rainbows, elk moving, occasionally you'd see a bear, lots of deer, night owls, and we would just sort of enjoy, that was her, she and I would have this little bonding experience at the end of every day. That stuck with me, and anytime I'm in a place like this and I'm fishing, it reminds me of that time. So this fishing trip is for her. Full disclosure, I lied. I didn't know I was lying. So I came out here, I told you that I came out here with 1 rod and 1 reel, which was about a 60-year-old combo that was my grandfather's. Well, guess what? Big surprise, it broke. So I was gonna do what every good fisherman does when things go sideways, you drink beer. But I went back to the van and I happened to look in the wheelie box in the van, and lo and behold, I have my Orvis 7-piece travel rod, and baby, this thing casts like a dream compared to the rod from my grandfather. So I have been fishing. The bad news is that there is nothing in my arsenal of flies that is interesting these fish at all. And this happens. I've never seen it this buggy out here. There are 3 separate hatches going on right now. I've thrown flies that date back 60 years to flies that I bought a couple of weeks ago, and nothing is working. So I will revert back to the beer drinking, maybe have some chips, maybe build a fire, I don't know, run around, maybe go to sleep early. All right, rain is coming down. It's definitely coming down. Looks like it's gonna rain all afternoon. We're gonna do an informal fly fishing Q&A with the non-fly fishing wife behind the camera asking me questions. Go. Oprah, Barbara Walters, and your wife, go.
When you walk to the river, what's the first thing that you look at to make a decision if you're going to fish there?
She said, when I first approach the river, what's the first thing I look at to figure out what I'm gonna do to fish? The first thing I do is I bend over the river and I look at my own reflection in the water, people. Just kidding. Basically, what I do is not what I would recommend doing, but I throw dry flies 100% of the time. I don't nymph, I don't throw sinking flies, I just don't enjoy it as much. So first thing I'm doing is looking for the hatch. What insects are around? What do they look like? What fly do I have that pairs up well? Tie it on, start fishing. Next question, go.
When you're driving down the road, what makes you stop to be able to say, this is where I'm going to fish?
Ooh, good question. When you're driving down the road and you're like this little dirt road that's running along this river, what makes me stop at one place over another? What makes me stop is the flow of the water and how it's flowing. So the speed. If the river is too shallow in places, you'll see a lot of rapids. That's too fast. I'm not looking for that. What I'm looking for are pools and eddies where I can throw that fly, the dry fly lands on the surface and has a second to just exist on that surface before the current of the river takes it. Most of the time when that fly, when that line comes out like this and hits, that fly is gonna fall, just drop perfectly straight down at the end. And that second as it's sitting there neutral, oftentimes is when you're gonna get a strike. So that's what I'm looking for, pools and eddies in the river. Question 3, go.
What are the factors that say, I'm done here, I need to move on and find another eddy?
Another good question. What are the factors that make me move from one spot to another on the river? So basically it's how much I have fished in one location. I try not to ever overfish a location. 1, because I don't really want to stress the fish. And 2, once you've walked around in the water, especially if you've caught a fish in a certain area, that creates a lot of sort of drama in the water. It can stir things up. A lot of other fish are going to move on. They're going to go to other places. So it depends on how wide the water is, how active the water is, how many fish. Like earlier today, there were sections where I could just, directly in front of me, there were multiple fish surfacing over and over and over again. That's a place that I can work a little bit longer, because the fish are so active. If it's quiet and a very, very tranquil small eddy, I can really only cast in there 2 or 3 times and then I need to move on. Most people are gonna wear waders and they're gonna get in the river, they're gonna walk upriver, casting into the eddies that way. I don't own waders again. I got rubber boots. And the water for this river is actually somewhat high. So I can't really get out towards the center of the river. Sometimes towards the fall, when the flow has dropped dramatically, I can get out into the center of this river more. It doesn't look It doesn't look big. It's not a wide river, but it's deep in places. So I don't know. Dynamite would be the other option. Ha, just kidding. That's it. I think you've had your part. You've had your participation. You got your fingerprints on this film. You couldn't stand it. You had to get involved instead of just staring at me. And I know I don't have any fish for dinner. I am a complete loser.